Good Yontif, everybody. Noah, build an ark. Abraham, go forth. Moses, go down to Egypt land. Solomon, build this temple. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, go prophecy to the stubborn people Israel. Go, I choose you, I send you forth. God called all of them, patriarch, king, and prophets. This idea of a calling, that God calls certain people, has had staying power throughout the centuries. And it's often applied to, or assumed about, or at least by some, to clergy. When people ask, were you called? When did you receive the call to the cloth, or the ministry, or the rabbinates? I hear that question every few months. I get that question. Rabbi, when were you called? How did you know? What did it feel like? I appreciate the question when I get it. It shows a genuine concern, I think, a genuine interest, rather. But certainly, for me, no lightning bolts. God did not demand my submission like God demanded the submission of the prophets. In fact, the only submission for me was when I submitted my application to rabbinical school, which was part of a very long process of studying for the GREs, taking them, lining up recommendations from extremely reluctant former professors and employers, writing essays, sweating out the interviews, applying for scholarships and loans, then 5 years of rabbinical school, exams, papers, presentations, internships, during which time our family of 3, when I began, became a family of 5, and then we moved. Oh, how we moved. We started in Jersey, then we went to Cincinnati for a year, then we went back to Jersey for 2 years, then we went to Israel for a year, then we came back to New Jersey because it's very hard to get away from New Jersey. And then I went through a challenging, stressful matching process, and I landed here in the land of Chicago, Chicagoland. Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Moses and Noah, they didn't have to go through any of that. For them, it was simple. God called them, and boom, they were called. They were called into their vocations. I love, and in fact have studied, have taught quite a lot of these callings in the Bible. When God calls ordinary people to become prophets and kings, they have, for me, sort of a fantasy element to them. Like, I wish that would have happened to me. Even though it's very forceful, very often God is overwhelming this poor person, almost always a man, overwhelming that person until they're rendered completely inert, really, until they recover, and then can continue with their missions as prophets, for instance. So I love that. I wish that happened to me. God overwhelms them into submission, and they didn't have a choice in the matter. But really, I think that my favorite calling in the Bible is very different. It is not forceful at all. It is touching. This is when Samuel, at this point a boy, and apprentice to Eli the priest, is called by God. Samuel was living with Eli, and it's like a parent-child relationship. And one night Eli is in his room, and Samuel is asleep in an adjacent room, and he's just a boy. And then, Vayikra Adonai el Shmuel, and the Lord called to Samuel. And so Samuel gets up, and where's he go? He runs to Eli, the priest, and he says, Hineni, here I am, ki karatali, for you called me. But Eli said, no, I did not call you. Go back to sleep. Go back and lie down. So Samuel goes back and he lies down. He falls back to sleep. But again, he hears a voice, Shmuel, Samuel. And Samuel jumped up again, and he runs back to Eli, and he says, Hineni, ki karatali, I'm here for you, you've called me. And Eli says this time, Beni, my son, I did not call you, go back and lie down. And then a third time, Shmuel, Shmuel, Samuel, Samuel, and he runs back to Eli, and he says, Hineni, here I am, for you've called me. And then that's when Eli the priest, realized, no, it was God that was calling the boy Samuel. And so he said, go back, Samuel, go back and lie down. And if God calls you again, says, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. And that's what happened. Samuel went back and he lay down, and he heard that voice again, Samuel, Samuel, and Samuel responded, speak, for your servant is listening. It's actually fascinating because right before that story of Samuel's calling, the biblical narrator says that at that time, God was not in the habit of calling to people. There were no calls for a certain period of time, but obviously God felt that there was a need in Israel, among the people of Israel, for someone like Samuel, who would become the great judge and prophet and anointer of kings. So that was then. That was then. What about now? And what about us? Is God calling anyone these days to great historic missions or to specific vocations? What about, for instance, Herzl, Theodor Herzl? And I read a biography and a half of Herzl this summer. Does he not seem called, Herzl? He was not religious, at least not in a traditional sense, but he sensed a calling. In his very voluminous diary entries, Herzl expresses a heady amazement at having been transformed from private individual to historic figure. And he was wildly popular among the Jews of Europe in his day, wildly popular. What about Sharansky? Right now I'm reading Natan Sharansky's memoir, Fear No Evil. He wrote, also at that time he was not religious growing up in the Soviet Union, but he wrote in his memoir, this new life I had entered into was my destiny. It felt like a calling. Martin Luther King wrote, in a very short letter that he wrote, he said, I came to see that God had placed a responsibility upon my shoulders. Mother Teresa, when she was in her 20s, after she had already started her work, she was on a train in England, and she claims to have heard God's voice saying, wilt thou refuse? All of these great leaders felt called by God. Is it possible? Is that literally possible? When I was in rabbinical school, there were a couple of professors who referred to us students as clay kodesh, as holy vessels. That has a calling feeling to it. And some of us students, some of my fellow students just loved that calling feeling. They bought into it. They indulged in a sense of rabbinic destiny. They loved it. It was like a humble boast, like they say. I'm merely the Lord's vessel. I was called to serve. One classmate, who is my closest friend from rabbinical school, doesn't go so far as to say that he was called to be a rabbi. Instead, he believes that God nudged him toward the rabbinate. Okay, so God planted the seed, my friend tended the soil. I appreciate the distinction, for at the very least, he gives my friend Josh some say in the matter. He gives him some autonomy and some agency. And I believe it is extraordinarily important for us to believe that we have the power to decide what we do with our lives, that we are in charge, that we choose our careers, that we choose our mates, that we choose our homes, and so forth. To believe otherwise, for instance, in this thing, Beshert, which is a beautiful idea, things determined by God. But to believe in that direction really, I think, robs the human being of our most important tool, the power to decide, the power to make, as Heidegger said, resolute decisions. Moreover, the idea of a calling also seems to me to imply a hierarchy of jobs, a hierarchy of careers, as if certain careers are sanctioned by God determined by God, and they're therefore somehow more valuable than others. Not true. I firmly believe not true, because we all of us, everyone, we all add value. We are all, in a sense, called to serve. We need each other in different ways, but in equally important ways. I fulfill, I hope, a role as a rabbi in your life, which is a great, 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 great honor for me. And at certain times you call on me, and I hope that I respond when you call. At other times, though, I'm going to suggest that you call someone else. Like when your car coughs and sputters, I can offer moral support, I can offer an automobile mishaberach, but I think what you better do is call an auto mechanic. Call on them. And when it's 94 degrees and your air conditioner breaks down, I can bring over some iced tea. But I highly recommend calling someone well-trained in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. That's an expertise that I have no clue as to how that works. So that's whom you want to call. So to be clear, and I hope, friends, that this is helpful information for you, I ask you, when you need candy, who are you going to call? The candy man. And when you have a broken hinge on your door, who are you going to call? The handyman, of course. And when you hear footsteps outside your home, call the policeman or policewoman. Who else? And when you hear ghoulish howls coming from your attic, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters, thank you. I really just wanted to get there. But truly and seriously, we call each other. We literally call each other to make our lives better. We are interconnected. We need each other for our respective expertise. So if any one of us is called, we are all called. We are all called. All of us, like the accountant, the attorney, the acrobat, the horse trainer, the caretaker, the bricklayer, the gravedigger, carpet cleaner, real estate broker, house builder, dog groomer, judge, bailiff, nurse, doctor, bus driver, carton maker, dry cleaner, homemaker, home builder, toy maker, mail carrier, box packer, fishmonger, fundraiser, financial planner, firefighter, actor, baker, banker, lawyer, plumber, roofer, trainer, waiter, pianist, pilot, printer, playwright, pharmacist, physicist, psychologist, cardiologist, novelist, stylist. You think I'm done? I am not. Geologist, meteorologist, optometrist, phlebotomist, zoologist, electrician, musician, mathematician, politician, librarian, and those in construction, production, and demolition, the athlete, umpire, importer, exporter, hotel porter, mail sorters, reporter, school teacher, don't forget the school teachers, trash collector, decorator, director, surveyor, and the EMT, emergency management technician, the ENT, and of course, those who work and volunteer at EHNTJC. The secretary, actuary, apothecary, and the person who edits my dictionary, and at the end of the day, when most everyone's gone home, the person who cleans the toilets and mops the floors. What will we do without them? Like Maria, who works downstairs at the ECC, the Solomon Schechter Early Childhood Center. She comes late in the afternoon. She never sees the children and the teachers for whom she cleans, but she cleans like she knows them because she cares. And like the young man who comes to our house, his name is Phil, the exterminator, and he keeps ants away from our kitchen. He so clearly cares about his work. The ants don't like him, but we do. And have we not all, truly, when you think about it, benefited in some way from basically every other profession? Do we not depend on one another? This is the nature of human society. Within this great, multifaceted, complicated web of humanity, we are all enmeshed. This has been one of the great lessons, and I would say even great revelations of the pandemic as well. We are all essential. And would God not be pleased? To render a service to another is truly to serve. It's truly to serve God. Samuel understood this. When God called him, where did he go? To whom did he respond? He responded to another human being, to his master, his teacher. Every job well done, Every job that any of us have done, well done, is a contribution. And every job well done in every religious tradition is a mandate. It is actually sacred. When I was a teenager, I remember I was in the kitchen. I told my mom I might want to be a truck driver. My mom, without missing a beat, said, just be the best truck driver that you can be. And our sages had all sorts of jobs. They had day jobs. They were tanners and welders and vintners and more. One sage, Rabbi Natan, said a person should love work and not hate it, for it was given to us as a covenant. A covenant. Covenant means relationship. Our work is relational. Well, you say, my work is not so lofty. It's just this. It's just that. And I say, no, it is this. It is that. And whatever this or that may be is important. Every career, however humble, is, in the words of Max Ehrman, who wrote Desiderata, every career is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Friends, on the high holidays we are called. We are called to account. Yes, we are. But we are also called to ask ourselves, how do I fit in? How have I fit in within the web? How have I contributed? How might I still? And I truly wish us all to affirm, for each one of us individually, I have contributed. I have contributed. I was called. We've possessed real possessions in the changing fortunes of time. We have all rendered our services. We are all clay kodesh, holy vessels, filling the cups of sisters and brothers. The Lord called Samuel in a human voice. Speak, my friend, for your servant is listening. Lishana Tova.